Guys, can you just quickly introduce yourselves, tell me what you do and why you're doing it?
Okay, my name's Chris Simpson, or Lemmy. I'm the programmer on Project Zomboid.
Live at the military blockade, the message is clear. The Nox event is contained.
These are the end times. There was no hope of survival. This is how you died. In most zombie games, you are a hero. You have a machine gun. You mow down thousands of undead. You save the girl. You find the cure. In Project Zomboid, you are nobody. You are a burger flipper, a mechanic, a nurse, and you will die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually you will make a mistake. You will open the wrong door. You will eat a burnt pork chop. You will get scratched. And then you will wait for the fever to take you. But the story of this game is even more terrifying than the zombies inside it. It is a story of a development team cursed by bad luck. They had their funds frozen by Google. They had their laptops stolen, losing years of code in a single night. They were called scammers. They were called incompetent. They were laughed at for taking 10 years to finish an update. And yet, like a shambling corpse that refuses to stay down, Project Zomboid kept coming. The story of the Indie Stone. The story of the longest, hardest road in early access history. And how a pixelated isometric game became the most realistic simulation of the apocalypse ever made. Go back to 2011. The zombie genre was exploding. The Walking Dead had just started on TV. Minecraft was in beta. But Chris Lemmy Simpson and Marina Mash Seo Chong looked at the games market and felt bored. Every zombie game was an action movie. You aim for the head. You run fast. They didn't want an action movie. They wanted a simulation. They pitched a simple idea. The Sims meets Dawn of the Dead. They didn't care about the shooting. They cared about the mundane. Where do you sleep? How do you cover the windows with sheets? What happens if you get depressed because you haven't read a book in 3 weeks? They formed a tiny team called the Indie Stone. They released a tech demo. It was ugly, buggy, and barely playable. But the internet loved the promise. Even Notch, the creator of Minecraft, endorsed it. Money started rolling in. They were selling the game directly through their website using Google Checkout. They were young, excited, and ready to quit their day jobs. And then the curse began. Google decided that selling a game that wasn't finished was against their terms of service. They froze the account. The Indie Stone lost access to their money. They couldn't refund players. They couldn't pay rent. The community started to get nervous. Is this a scam? But this was just a stumbling block. The real disaster was waiting in a dark apartment in Newcastle. October 2011. Chris and the team had been crunching, working nonstop to rebuild the game after the Google disaster. They went out for a break. When they returned to their apartment, the door was open, the heart-sinking feeling of violation. They ran to their desks. The laptops were gone. Now, you might ask, did they have a backup? It was 2011. Cloud storage like Dropbox was in its infancy for huge projects. GitHub wasn't the standard yet. They had external hard drives, which were also in the laptop bags. They lost everything. The latest update, the new combat system, months of work, gone. When they announced the news, they expected sympathy. Instead, they got hate. The internet is a cynical place. People didn't believe them. How convenient, the comments read. Just after you took our money, you lost the code. Exit scam. Vaporware. Liars. It broke them. Chris Simpson later said he felt physically sick for weeks. He thought his career was over. Most teams would have quit. They had the perfect excuse. But the Indie Stone made a choice. They refused to die. They went back to an old, outdated backup on a flash drive, and they started rewriting the lost code from memory. They worked through the depression. They worked through the hate mail. It took them months just to get back to where they started. But they learned a lesson. Trust no one, back up everything, and keep the scope small. Or so they thought. In 2013, they finally launched on Steam Early Access. But the development speed was glacial. Players call it the long wait. Updates didn't come in weeks. They came in years. Build 39, build 40. The community joke became, my grandchildren will play build 42. Why was it so slow? Because they were obsessively adding depth that no other game dared to touch. They built the Moodle system. In Project Zomboid, your biggest enemy isn't the zombie. It's your own brain. If you stay inside too long, you get bored. If you get bored, you get sad. If you get sad, you perform actions slower. If you see too many zombies, you get panicked and your aim gets worse. You can die because you smoked too many cigarettes and didn't drink enough water. They revolutionized the camera. It's an isometric game, top-down. Usually in these games, you can see everything around you. Not in Zomboid. They implemented a strict line of sight and hearing system. If your character isn't looking behind them, you can't see behind them. A zombie can be standing 2 feet away from you, silent, just out of your peripheral vision. This created a tension that 3D horror games struggled to match. The fear of what you can't see, even though you have a god's eye view. They added a fully simulated lore timeline. When you start the game, the infection has just begun. The TV stations are still broadcasting news. You can watch the world fall apart in real time. Helicopters fly over, drawing zombies to your location. Gunshots ring out in the distance, the meta events. You are not the main character. You are just living in a world that is dying around you. By 2018, the game was a cult classic, but it looked old. The characters were 2D sprites. They couldn't wear different clothes. They waddled like penguins. The Indie Stone announced Build 41, the animation update. They said it would take a while. It took 3 years. They didn't just add animations. They rebuilt the entire game engine from scratch. They replaced the 2D sprites with full 3D models. They added a clothing system where you could wear a t-shirt, a sweater, a jacket, and a vest. And the zombies could bite through the layers based on the fabric strength. They added stealth crouching. They added vaulting over fences. They bet the entire company on this update. In December 2021, 10 years after the laptop theft, they released Build 41 with multiplayer. It was a nuclear explosion. Streamers who had ignored the game for a decade suddenly jumped in. Call of Duty players, Minecraft players, role players. The concurrent player count went from 2,000 to 65,000 in a week. Multiplayer changed everything. Now, This Is How You Died became This Is How We Died. You could drive cars with your friends. One person driving, 3 people shooting out the windows. You could build a fortress. But the simulation meant the tragedy was shared. If your friend gets bitten, you have a choice. You waste resources trying to keep them alive? Do you execute them? Or do they drink bleach voluntarily to save the group the trouble? Amidst all this darkness, there is a raccoon, Spiffo, the mascot of the game. A cute cartoon raccoon who tells you to press Q to take the antidote. Spoiler, pressing Q shouts, "Hey you!" and attracts every zombie in the neighborhood. Spiffo represents the developer's sense of humor. They know the game is brutal, so they wrap it in a layer of irony. And then, there are the modders. Because development was so slow, the community took over. They built massive cities like Raven Creek. They added tanks. They added functional NPCs before the developers did. The Indie Stone hired the best modders. The developer Turbo Two-Tone started as a modder. Now he builds the game. They understood that in a sandbox game, the community creates the content. The modding scene proves how flexible the engine is. You can turn Project Zomboid into a Silent Hill horror game, stalker shooter, or a cozy farming simulator until the helicopter comes. It is the ultimate platform for disaster roleplay. So, where is the game now? The team is currently working on Build 42, and in classic Indie Stone fashion, it has taken years. But the scope is terrifying. They are adding animals. Cows, sheep, deer. Now you can be a rancher in the apocalypse. They are adding basements, skyscrapers with 30 floors, a functional fluid system for blood and water. They are adding crafting stations that look like Factorio. Critics say they are too slow. Why does it take 12 years to finish a game? But the fans know the truth. Project Zomboid isn't trying to be finished. It is trying to be perfect. In an industry where AAA games are released broken and abandoned after a year, the Indie Stone has supported one game for over a decade. No paid DLC, no microtransactions, just free updates, forever. Project Zomboid is the anti-game. It doesn't care if you have fun. It cares if you survive. It teaches you that a gun is loud and attracts death. It teaches you that water is heavy. It teaches you that loneliness kills faster than a bite. It is a masterpiece because it embraces failure. When you die in other games, you reload. In Project Zomboid, your character becomes a zombie. If you start a new game in the same world, you can find your old self walking down the street, wearing your backpack, carrying your loot. You have to kill your past self to reclaim your future. The Indie Stone lost their code, lost their money, and lost their reputation. But they survived, and in doing so, they taught us all a lesson. It's not about how you died, it's about how long you managed to live. The story of Project Zomboid is still being written. With Build 42 on the horizon, the simulation is about to get even deeper. I want to know your story. How did your longest run end? Did you get bitten by a crawler? Did you crash your car, or did you accidentally eat a poisonous berry? Tell me your tragic end in the comments below. If you love deep dives into the most complex games ever made, smash that subscribe button. But do it quietly. Don't attract the horde. Ring the bell to be notified when the next documentary drops. Until then, press Q to cure the infection. Don't actually do that.